$23 million. That's the estimated value of Roloff Farms in Helvetia, Oregon. $23 million built on pumpkin patches, zip lines, pirate ships, and 17 seasons of one of TLC's most beloved family shows. And when the cameras finally stopped rolling, when the contracts dried up and the dust settled, Matt Roloff's 4 children walked away without a single acre, not 1 square foot, not 1 building, nothing. So before we go any further, I need you to sit with that number for a second. $23 million and 0 transfers of ownership to the next generation. If that math already feels wrong to you, stay with me, because this story gets a lot more complicated and a lot more familiar than you might expect. If this kind of deep dive content is what you're here for, do me a favor right now. Hit that like button and subscribe to LPBW Update. We cover this world seriously, and this channel is the place to be if you want the full picture, not just the highlight reel. Now let's get into it. To understand how we got here, you have to understand what Little People Big World actually was, not just as a television show, but as a financial engine. When TLC greenlit the series in 2006, the Roloff family was already interesting. Matt and Amy, both with dwarfism, raising 4 children, one of whom, Zach, also has dwarfism, on a working farm outside Portland. It had warmth, it had conflict, it had the kind of everyday extraordinary quality that reality television runs on. But here's what most viewers never stop to think about. The show didn't just document the farm. The show funded it. TLC payments, which for a family of 6 on a long-running cable series can reach well into the hundreds of thousands of dollars per season, didn't go into a savings account somewhere collecting dust. They went back into the property. Expansions, renovations, the Western town set, the castle, the zip lines that would eventually make Roloff Farms a legitimate tourist attraction, charging real admission prices to real visitors. Every season that aired, every ratings bump, every viral moment, it translated into cash that went back into the ground, into the structures, into the brand. The farm that exists today is not what existed before the cameras arrived. It is, in a very concrete and traceable way, a product of the show. And the show was a product of the entire family. Which brings us to the part of this story that makes everything else harder to look away from. Jeremy, Zach, Molly, and Jacob Roloff did not choose to be on television. They were children when the cameras arrived. Zach and Jeremy were 16 years old in the first season. Molly was 12. Jacob was just 6. They grew up, actually grew up, in front of an audience of millions. Their awkward phases, their struggles, their fights, their heartbreaks, their medical challenges, all of it captured, edited, and broadcast for profit. And here's the legal reality that rarely gets discussed in the fan communities. They had no meaningful ability to refuse. There is a law in the United States called the Coogan Law, named after child actor Jackie Coogan, who famously earned millions as a child performer and arrived at adulthood to find his parents had spent almost all of it. The law, which has been updated and expanded over the decades, is designed to ensure that a percentage of a minor performer's earnings is protected in a trust that parents cannot access. But the Coogan Law has significant gaps. It applies clearly to traditional entertainment, films, scripted television, commercials. Its application to reality television, where children appear as themselves rather than as performers playing characters, has historically been murky and inconsistently enforced. Some states have stronger protections than others. Oregon, where the Roloffs lived and filmed, has its own version of child performer protections, but the degree to which those protections were triggered, applied, and honored in the context of an unscripted family docuseries is something we simply don't have full public visibility into. What we do know is this: the Roloff children participated in the creation of enormous value. Their presence, their personalities, their relationships, their conflicts was the product being sold. And they did it as minors, without the legal capacity to negotiate their own terms or protect their own financial interests. That's not an accusation. That's just what reality television was, and still is, for the families who agree to it. Now, here's where I have to pump the brakes and be genuinely fair, because this story only holds up if we tell all of it. Matt Roloff is not a passive beneficiary who sat back while others built his empire. The man is a genuinely impressive builder. The physical structures on Roloff Farms, the western town, the castle, the pirate ship, the zip lines, were not hired out to contractors and forgotten about. Matt designed them. He was hands-on in their construction. For someone with achondroplasia, navigating physical construction work is not a small thing, and Matt has never shied away from the challenge. He drove the creative vision of what the farm could become. He pushed it past what a working pumpkin farm typically looks like and turned it into an experience destination. The annual pumpkin season events, the farm stays, the Airbnb-style accommodations he developed in later years, those are the products of his ambition, his energy, and his willingness to reinvest rather than cash out. You have to hold both of those things at the same time. The farm is worth what it's worth, partly because Matt Roloff poured himself into it. And the farm is worth what it's worth, partly because TLC money flowed through it for 17 seasons. Both are true. Neither cancels the other out. The complexity is the point. Because here's where the story pivots. When Matt and Amy Roloff's marriage ended, officially finalized in divorce in 2016 after a long and very public deterioration, the farm became a legal asset to be divided. This is where the financial history of this family gets concrete in ways that the show only partially showed us. Amy Roloff, after the divorce, retained partial ownership of the farm, and then, in 2019, she sold her share back to Matt. The reported figure for that transaction was in the neighborhood of $667,000. Now, I want you to hold that number up against the overall estimated farm value and just think about what that proportion looks like. Whether that sale reflected fair market value for her share, whether Amy had strong legal representation in those negotiations, and whether the settlement she received adequately accounted for her years of contribution, both to the farm's operations and to the television show that funded its growth, are questions that the public record doesn't fully answer. But the transaction itself is documented. Amy walked away from the farm. Matt retained full ownership. And from that point forward, what happens to the farm and who benefits from it became entirely his decision. This is where Zach Roloff enters the picture in the most painful chapter of this story. In 2022, it became public, partly through the show itself, partly through social media, that Zach and his wife Tori had entered into negotiations with Matt to purchase a portion of Roloff Farms. This was not a secret kept from the cameras. Zach was transparent about it. He wanted to stay connected to the property he grew up on. He wanted to raise his own children, his and Tori's kids, who also have dwarfism, in a place that had meaning for his family. He wanted to continue the farm's legacy in the most literal possible sense. The negotiations fell apart. And here is where the numbers become genuinely illuminating. Roloff Farms, depending on which portion you're looking at and how you value the commercial tourism operation alongside the raw land, has been estimated at values ranging from somewhere around $4 million for portions of the property up to totals approaching $23 million for the entire operation when you account for its brand, its revenue streams, and its development potential. Matt's asking price for the portion Zach was interested in, the main farm area, was reported to be in the range of $1.6 to $1.8 million. Zach's position, as he described it on the show, was that he expected some kind of family consideration, not a gift, not a handout, a discount that acknowledged the reality that this was a family property, built in part through family participation. Matt did not offer one. Think about what that means in percentage terms. If the farm parcel in question is worth $1.6 million at market rate, a family discount of even 10% would have cost Matt $160,000. On a property worth millions, developed over nearly 2 decades, partly through the labor and presence of the children now asking for consideration. The gap between what Zach hoped for and what Matt offered was not measured in millions. It may have been measured in hundreds of thousands, and it ended with Zach and Tori moving to Washington State, away from the farm, away from Matt, and with a relationship that has visibly and publicly cooled. A discount that might have amounted to a fraction of a single season's TLC payout could not be found. That's the story. Now let's look at the full picture. All 4 kids. Jeremy Roloff left the show and built something genuinely independent. He and his wife Audrey have created their own brand, their own book, their own podcast presence, their own audience. Whatever you think of their content or their choices, Jeremy figured out how to build something that didn't require the farm. He doesn't appear to have ownership of any part of the property, but he also doesn't appear to be fighting for it. Jeremy moved on. Zach Roloff, as we just covered, tried to stay. He wanted a future there. He made a formal attempt to purchase part of the farm at a family-adjusted price, was turned down, and relocated his family out of state. Whatever the future holds for that relationship, right now it is strained. The farm he grew up on is not his. Molly Roloff is the one most people forget about in these conversations because she made a quiet, early exit from public life. She left the show. She got married. She moved away. She has maintained a private life with impressive consistency for a reality television family member. She doesn't appear to have pursued any claim to the farm, and she's given the public no reason to think she expected one. Jacob Roloff's departure from the show was the most contentious. Jacob left early, publicly criticized the show and its impact on his childhood, and has been open about psychological harm he associates with growing up on camera. His relationship with the farm and with his father appears to be the most complex of all 4 siblings. He has no ownership stake. 4 children, a combined total of decades of on-camera participation, beginning in childhood when none of them had legal capacity to negotiate. A farm now estimated to be worth somewhere in the range of tens of millions of dollars. 0 equity, 0 ownership, 0 transfer. If you were to put that in a spreadsheet, and I mean that literally, a simple spreadsheet with names in one column and ownership percentage in the next, the column for the kids would be completely empty. Every row, every child, 0. The visual is what it is. Now, and again, this is important, Matt Roloff has spoken to his reasoning. He's not silent about it. His argument, which he has made on camera and in interviews, is essentially this. The farm is his retirement. It is his financial security. He built it. Giving it away, even partially, even at a discount, would undermine the foundation of his own future. He has needs. He has expenses. He has a life to fund without a TLC paycheck. These are not crazy arguments. They are real considerations. A person in their 60s looking at an asset that represents their primary financial security has legitimate reason to be careful about how they manage that asset. Nobody is suggesting Matt should have simply handed the farm over, but here's the question that Matt's framing doesn't quite answer. What does retirement security actually require? If the farm is worth, let's be conservative, $10 million in total value, and Matt sells a parcel to Zach at a family price that is, say, 15% below market rate, what does Matt's retirement actually lose? A percentage of one sale on one parcel of a multi-million-dollar property. Is that the difference between financial security and financial insecurity? Or is it the difference between full market return and a slightly reduced one? There appears to be a number, a real number, somewhere between give it away and full asking price that was never publicly explored. A number that might have kept Zach and Tori in Oregon, that might have preserved a closer relationship between Matt and his grandchildren, that might have answered the question of legacy in a way that the current situation does not. That number was never found, or never looked for. And this is where the story stops being just about the Roloffs and starts being about something a lot of us recognize. Research on family businesses is pretty consistent on this point. Somewhere around 70% of family businesses fail to successfully transfer to the next generation. That's not mostly because of market forces or bad business decisions. It's mostly because of family dynamics, because of unspoken promises and unresolved resentments, because of the gap between what parents say they intend and what they actually put in writing, because of the enormous emotional complexity of turning a family home into a financial negotiation. "Someday this will be yours" is one of the most powerful things a parent can say to a child who is working hard for the family, staying close, making sacrifices. It creates loyalty. It creates motivation. It creates an expectation that, when it goes unfulfilled, creates exactly the kind of rupture we're watching play out in public with this family. I want to ask you something directly. How many of you have helped with a family business? Really helped, long hours, real work, on the understanding that it would matter someday? How many of you stayed geographically close to aging parents, turned down opportunities elsewhere, made choices shaped by a future that was promised but never formalized? How many of you watched that future quietly evaporate, without a conversation, without an explanation, without the other party even seeming to notice that a promise had been broken? The Roloff story is remarkable because it happened in public, because there are cameras and contracts and estimated property values we can look up. But the emotional core of it, the child who contributed, expected recognition, and received none, is not remarkable at all. It is one of the most common experiences in family life. That's why this story resonates the way it does. That's why comment sections about this family fill up so fast. People are not just watching the Roloffs, they are watching themselves. Matt Roloff talks about legacy constantly. It comes up in interviews, in his social media presence, in the way he describes his relationship to the farm. Legacy is clearly something he has thought deeply about and cares about genuinely. But here's a question worth sitting with. Legacy is not really about what you leave behind. It's about how the people you leave it to feel about the way you handled it. Right now, Zach Roloff lives in a different state. He is raising his children away from the farm his father talks about as a legacy. Whatever warmth exists between them, and I'm not saying it's gone, it has been complicated in ways that are now part of the public record. The legacy Matt is building is not just the physical property. It is the memory his children carry of how the decisions were made. And that part of the legacy is already written. Is that what Matt intended? Maybe. Maybe he made peace with the cost and decided it was worth it. But if the answer is no, if he hoped that legacy would include a close, connected, multi-generational family rooted in that land, then something went wrong between the intention and the execution. And it probably went wrong at a number, a price, a percentage, a discount that was never offered. There's still time, of course. These situations are not always permanent. Families surprise us. People change. Conversations happen off camera that we never see. Matt Roloff is not an old man, and this story doesn't have a final chapter yet. But the farm is currently being sold off. Parcels are going to the open market. Buyers who are not named Roloff are closing on land that the Roloff children helped, in a very real sense, to build into what it is. And each sale narrows the window. The Roloff children helped construct one of reality television's most recognized properties, not just by appearing on it, but by living their actual lives on camera from childhood, by being the emotional content that kept 17 seasons of viewers coming back, by being the reason TLC cut the checks that funded the expansions that made the farm worth what it's worth. And they walked away without an acre. If that made you feel something, if it reminded you of a situation in your own life, or if it made you see a show you've watched for years in a completely different way, the like button is right below this. Hit it. It helps more people find this content, and this channel is built on taking these stories seriously rather than just chasing drama. And drop your comment below. Do you think any of the Roloff children will ever own a piece of that farm? And if you've lived through something like this in your own family, an unfulfilled promise, a business that didn't pass the way it was supposed to, I genuinely want to hear about it. Because this comment section is one of the most thoughtful communities on YouTube when it comes to this show. And what this audience brings to these conversations is why we keep making them. Subscribe if you're not already here. We cover little people, big world with the depth and seriousness it actually deserves. And the next video is going to take you somewhere you haven't seen this story go before. We'll see you there.